With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Hey friends and allies, this is Michael Thompson, and I'm excited to share with you this next Exploring More podcast series. In the kingdom of God, you get the chance to connect with other kingdom men, kingdom women, and the conversations and the exploration just goes on and on and on. So recently, I had the invitation to join some friends, new friends, Jim Ramos and Dale Culver out in Oregon for their podcast series called the Mancard Podcast. And we had a ball. They had gotten their hands on the Heart of a Warrior book and wanted to talk. And so we have a 4-part series now that we want to offer to you in our conversations about part 1 and 2, being a beloved son, and then parts 3 and 4 about what it means to be a warrior in the kingdom. You can find out more about our friends Jim and Dale at their podcast website page, mancardpodcast.com. Hope you enjoy the conversation about the significance of being a beloved son and what it looks like then to fight for the hearts of others as a warrior in the kingdom of God.
Hey, I'm excited today about our guest, Michael Thompson. Lives in Durham, North Carolina. He is the president and director of Zoe, which is a ministry for men and couples. He's been doing that for 10 years. He's authored 2 books, Search and Rescue, The Life and Love Looking for You, and then The Heart of a Warrior. Before you can become the warrior, you must become the beloved son, which we're going to talk about in depth in the next 2 podcasts. And then he's got a book coming up real soon, Michael, Brazen, Fearless, Bold, and Without Shame, huh?
Yeah.
When is that coming out?
Well, you know, there was an interesting response to the Heart of a Warrior. So Brazen will be out probably in the early spring, and it's really one that is more women were starting to read Heart of a Warrior, either grabbing the book that was on there or buying it for their husbands and getting into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so there's been some good rumbling of, when's the women's book coming out? So my wife and I have made some translations. Not everything is the same, obviously, for what does it look like to be a warrior princess? What's it look like to be a warrior queen? What's it look like to be strong and bring this name that God gives women in the garden, Ezer? And it's a name, Ezer Kenegdo. What's that look like? What's that mean? And so anyway, Brazen is coming in the spring, and we're working on that even now. So, yeah.
So that's more focused on the ladies.
Yeah, it'll be more directed for them, but I'm hoping that a lot of men will pick it up because Robin does some speaking and sharing at some of the men's weekends about the heart of a woman, and she always steals the show. It really is hard for me to ever follow her up after that, and so we just thought we'd put some of that stuff in some pages. So I think men will really appreciate some of the things that she's offering there. So,
that's really good. That's really good. So under accomplishments, you wrote being a kingdom son, husband of Robin, I'm guessing 28 years still, 28 years, father to Ashley, Hannah, and Abby. They are 25, 23, and 21. Now, Dale said that did you plan it naming your daughters Aha? A-H-A? You did?
Yeah.
No, come on.
No,
okay, I was like, there's no way.
Happy accident.
Okay.
I love it.
All Dale's daughters are all H's, and his wife is an H. Heather, Hannah, Hayden, and Haley. So
you have 3 daughters, Dale. That's awesome. Yeah.
Praise God.
That's why we do men's ministry, Dale.
Right.
We got to get out of the house every now and then and mix it up with the brothers. So,
oh man, put the fear of God in these young guys. So anyway,
that's right.
Old Testament Jesus, Old Testament God, Yahweh's coming.
Oh man.
Hey, he's also part of the redemptive community called Zoe, where they pursue intimacy with God and deep friendships with one another. His passion and mission in life is creating an environment for men to connect with God, guiding and sharing with men what it looks like to live an oriented life, to experience who they are, where they are, and the good God is up to in their lives. Now, I had to translate that into my gym language as why they are. So we'll talk more about that in the podcast because I think that's a big part of it. And so, Michael, we're going to throw you, man. We're going to throw you into the rapid fire round. Are you ready for this?
I don't know. I hope so. Yeah. Let's see if I'm standing after it. Let's do it.
Well, this to me is maybe the toughest rapid fire round. We call it the Would You Rather round.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you questions starting with the phrase, would you rather, and you just tell me which one you would choose and why. And so we'll start off with a fairly easy one. Would you rather climb Mount Everest or skydive out of a plane at 30,000 feet?
Skydive.
Really? Oh, okay. Why is that?
I have a daughter who does that, and I have not done it yet. And the idea of flying versus trudging up Mount Everest sounds a little more appealing to me. I've just heard it's a sensational, amazing thing to do. So a bucket list for sure. Yeah, I'd love to fly. I'd love to fly for however many seconds or minutes that puts me up there.
Well, and you probably will live. If you climb Mount Everest, the chances of living are less, I'm sure. So I would
losing a toe.
Or your fingers, yeah. So
nose, whatever.
I would go with Mount Everest personally, just because I'm not jumping out of a plane. But anyway, that's okay. Would you rather talk your way out of a situation or fight your way out?
Ooh, yeah. Talk my way first. I'd rather try to do that.
Yep, I agree. So I shouldn't say I agree. I got to be careful not to influence these guys' answers. So if you lived your life again, Michael, would you rather live in the past or live in the future?
Oh, man, I love history and story. That's a good one. Yeah, I God takes me back to characters sometimes in history and identity pieces sometimes in how he sees me and who I am in the kingdom. And so I have some affinity with some history. So I'd say that.
Yeah, I love it. Would you rather live forever but have all the ones you love die, or live a year with the people you love?
Oh, a year with the people I love.
Yeah. Good. Okay, here's a tough one. This one's a tough one, I think. For a lot of guys, this is a tough one. For me, this wasn't a tough one, but we'll see. Would you rather die for your wife or die for a child?
Oh, man, yeah, I see the toughness. Or a child, and when you have more of them.
I'm sorry, your child, one of your children, yes.
Yeah, my child. Yeah, I'd probably choose one of my children at this point.
Interesting.
28 years, we'll be together forever in the kingdom. I mean, yeah, that's a good one, man.
She would probably want you to choose your children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And if you ask me in an hour, I might answer differently.
If I asked you after she listened to the podcast.
Yeah.
No, I hear your answer is interesting. You did something I don't do. You answered according to what your wife would want you to do, which that was wise. That was wise. So
maybe. Yeah.
That's a tough one though.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That would
be brutal. That'd be a brutal situation to be in.
That would be brutal.
And yet, yeah.
Well, okay, let me get into the interview questions, man. So, hey, in 5 minutes, I feel like I know you pretty well. I've went on your website. I've listened to a couple videos that you're in. I've read the book. I have a friend. We have a mutual friend, Troy Mangum, who actually recommended me to you. Anyway, I call him Troy Magnum. He likes that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But I just, but I know you I feel like I know you a little bit, but in 5 minutes, why don't you tell our listeners your story? In other words, your personal life, things that you enjoy, hobbies, anything else about you that you think would be pertinent.
Yeah. So born in 1964, kid of the, 60s, 70s, back then when recess was still in elementary school and we pledged allegiance to the flag, and had a really idyllic, grew up with two brothers and just 5 years in between us. So we moved around a little bit. My dad was a commercial heating and air salesman and good at it. And so we kind of hit territories in the West. And what that meant for my parents in the cities that we lived, most weekends were adventures and exploration and camping. And my dad was a good college athlete. So, bats and balls were a part of our family, but God was a part of our family. I think, honestly, Jim, I might have been 10 or 11 before I knew that I met somebody that didn't go to church.
Wow.
and even wondered, like, how can you do that? Are you sure that? I don't think that's allowed. And that was the years of you were either a Protestant or a Catholic.
Yeah.
There was dividing lines there, but church was just a part of the family, our family's culture. We have, a big family and uncles, aunts, cousins, and all that stuff. So where that took me in my faith journey, all that mixed together. When I was 12 and my brother 11, we walked an aisle in a church. We saw plenty of people get baptized. We saw a lot of people go forward. And so we made our commitment in the formal sense that way. Sunday school, a lot of church on Sundays, Sunday nights, things like that. So when it was our turn, to go forward and make that decision, it really was driven by, you got door number one and door number two. One's heaven, one's hell. Mm-hmm. Which one you want? And I'm like, this is kind of like your question, rapid fire earlier. That was, is this a trick question? And, I'll choose heaven. And so, but what happened to me, particularly with athletics and continuing to play sports in junior high, high school, college, I really, my heart was alive there and identified with a lot of that performance kind of life, along with other things, grades, music, so much performance life and how that leaked into my faith and my faith journey. And maybe it's true for most of the men that I talk to and that we get to spend some time with. That leaked further into my faith than my faith leaked into life. And God, every Sunday there was an altar call. We sang a lot of songs until somebody kind of came forward or, did something. There was a lot of guilt that I felt. And I'm talking at 12, 13, 14, wow, when some of my worst years are actually in front of me still. But, you were just reminded and pounded pretty good about sin. And so communion, was another time that had a pretty heavy, for me anyway, the way I processed it. I'm not saying that all the pastors and teachers delivered it that way, but it processed in me, you're not doing enough, you're not good enough. And it really brought a pretty good wedge in between God's love and me and the conditional elements of that. And so Dale, I don't know about all your story, or Jim, yours history, but I think I accepted Christ into my life a couple hundred times, because it wasn't working. It was kind of the feeling, or, you had this sense that if I didn't mess up, it was kind of that spanking, you're going to get a spanking anyway, because you will, or, and just in case. And so God, what I started to form in my belief system internally was God's pretty mad. He took it out on Jesus, and you can have Jesus, but God's still going to stay pretty mad, and he's distant, and you're really not going to get to talk to him. He's going to use mediums and mediators. And I think that's some of the stuff that had to fall off of me later in life. But that gives you a little bit of background. Got involved in college sports, was a college basketball player, went on to play. Actually, at the time, there was a team called Athletes in Action that I loved, a couple of seasons with Athletes in Action back in the early 90s. And I do want to go on record. The socks got shorter and the shorts got longer. I played in that generation. So if you're looking at dating me, the opportunity to continue to play was good. And then I ended up in a campus ministry full time. After that, I joined Athletes in Action staff, and my wife and I met on staff, and we landed at Duke University, where we were the AIA staff for 11 years, and loved that. And then stepped into what we're talking about, what we're doing back in early 2000s. I went back to school and got a seminary degree in counseling, got a master's in counseling. God was about to renovate my life in a very significant way at 38, 39, and 40. That's when a lot of this stuff got worked on, and a lot of it worked out. A book that I think many of us in the men's initiative world found me, Wild at Heart. And that was really the beginning of my unraveling. I've told this story a few times where the monkeys get the scarecrow on the yellow brick road. That's what God was doing to me, with all kinds of love and all kinds of and rescue and all kinds of redemption. He was pulling me apart so that he could put me back together. And that's where Zoe kind of comes into the story after Wild at Heart and a few years of working with Ransom Heart and John and being a part of some things going on there, things like you guys are doing, things like we're doing. Those were formative for me, or reformative years for me. And we eventually left staff to start Zoe, and the redemptive community part. There was friends. We were doing this together, and we really realized that a lot of this journey is about friendship. It's about having good men and women in your foxhole, on your team, on the farm, doing the chores together, that kind of stuff. And I don't mean farm literally. I just mean, that we got to do day to day. And so those were huge years that I didn't know we were building something, or that a foundation was being built, but it was. A lot of men went out to Colorado, did some of John's stuff with me, came home, and all of a sudden the affinity, and you mentioned orientation earlier. Some of those things started to become clearer to us, and as we were growing in friendship and intimacy with God and with each other, those were the beginning ingredients for so much of what Zoe, how it started, and what we were fortunate and blessed to be a part of starting. So wow. That's it in a nutshell.
So now, where'd you do your undergraduate stuff? Where'd you play basketball?
Central Oklahoma Penitentiary. We were a Division II school in between Oklahoma State and OU. We had so many transfers and so many eligible guys.
Yep.
Coaches that threatened us all the time with, when these guys get eligible, Thompson, you're going to be on the end of the bench. Well, it was a wild. We had World War IIIs in practice, so game days were easy compared. And we had good teams in football, wrestling, basketball. We had really good teams. So that's a school that my dad went to in outside Oklahoma City, and Central Oklahoma was a good place for me. And then that led into the Athletes in Action opportunity. So that was undergrad, and then I didn't think I'd go back to school, but you put about 15 years on there. And I really did go back to school, Jim, because there was an ache in me, something that I didn't know, but all I knew was, okay, so God and I aren't where I want us to be. So maybe I need to learn more. Maybe I need more academics. Maybe I need more theology. And I'm a kid who grew up in church. So I had quite a wall full of diplomas if you do it by attendance. But as you guys know, longevity doesn't always equal maturity. And, I was repeating fourth grade over and over and over again in a lot of ways. And that's how, God began it was that seminary that the whole Eldridge and Wild at Heart came. So that's where things got really interesting for me to.
So Wild at Heart, he wrote that in 2001, I think. So right around 2001, 2002, you're having this reformation.
Right.
Or deconstruction, exactly. I like to say.
That's right. Yeah,
so you formed Zoe. So Zoe is the Greek word for life. So what would you say in a sentence your mission for Zoe is?
Yeah, to love people back to life.
So do people come to conferences and camps that you put on, or do you do groups around the country? What's your major, what's your best play? Yeah.
Some of all of that, but I think what's becoming the best play, and it's kind of gotten inverted, where we were kind of just a local initiative here with small groups and one-on-one. I never hung out the counseling shingle that much. I was more of a medic, running around and meeting people and helping that way. But when we started hosting weekends, that now is kind of a place of where a lot of beginnings happen, where 400 guys come together and walk into this and come out the other end very different, at least in orientation and even experiences and encounters with God. So we want to create environments where, God will love people to life, where we can kind of be the waiters and the hostesses and set the tables and try to foster that environment where men can connect with God.
And do you have your own? You said 400 men?
Yeah.
Holy cow! Do you have your own camp facility, or you rent out a facility?
Yeah, we've partnered with Young Life facilities.
That's the way to do it.
7-8 years, and they very few do it as well as they do.
Yep, that's a true statement.
And so, and they have a playground there for guys. When we can shoot stuff and throw stuff and fish and different things for free time. So it's a pretty important getaway where guys can unplug. And get that kind of quiet. And a Young Life facility has all the porches and the rocks and trees and places for a guy to retreat in order to get his heart back.
Yeah, I love it.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of the interview with the Mancard podcast. We wanted to offer our friends and allies, an invitation to get a hold of the books, The Heart of a Warrior and Search and Rescue, for a great deal bundled together for $27, more than 30% off their cover prices. The Heart of a Warrior is about the significance of receiving God's love, getting everything out of the way that's in the way of receiving. Search and Rescue is much about the larger story that we live in. If we don't understand the larger story that our story is in, how can we play our part well? Together, we believe these books are tremendous resources to helping a man with his kingdom orientation. You can pick up this great offer by going to the Zoe website, www.zoweh.org. Go to the store and you'll see it featured as one of our resources. Hi, friends and allies of the Exploring More podcast. This is Michael Thompson, and I hope you will join us for a special 3-part series where SJ and I are joined by our wives, Sherry and Robin, to explore more of the great invasion of God that we call Christmas. And then in part 2, the significant ways that we can celebrate Christmas. And in part 3, how we can walk with God into the new year. Hope you'll join us for this 3-part series. Let's jump back into our interview with the Mancard podcast.
Let's jump into your book. So you wrote a book called The Heart of a Warrior, and the subtitle is Before You Become a Warrior, You Must Become a Beloved Son. So now I have a question about your title. So you wrote the book for Christians, right? I'm assuming this is primarily for Christians? So when you said,
yeah.
so when I accept Christ, I am a beloved son. So I'm assuming that you're telling men that they need to receive this thing that God has offered to them. Is that how I interpret the title?
Yes. There's a belovedness. Being loved should have an effect on us.
Yeah.
And settle us in a way that our question, our core question of, like John said in his book, Wild at Heart, do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
Is answered yes. And prior to that, little boys and little girls come into this world asking a question or a couple questions. Do you see me, and do you love what you see?
Yes.
Do you want to be with me? And so when those questions are answered, then we don't have to panhandle anymore with other image bearers to provide the weighty answers that our hearts long to hear. If we can go to our Maker, if we can go to our Creator, if we can go to our Father with those questions and experience Him answering them, I think memorizing the verses are really important. And I'm that guy, Jim and Dale, who had the theology. Where I was really shallow was experiencing, or making the connections anyway, of experiencing God's love. And if He's the most loving being in the universe, then we ought to be experiencing it on a pretty heavy, regular basis. And so that's why the belovedness needs to be that it's an experience, Jim, that I was after in the book, because that's what was transforming me. When God was showing me and telling me, the old show and tell, that He is particularly fond of me. He loves me. He made me for intimacy with Himself, and He loves what He made. Oh, that is a game changer. It was just a game changer.
Well, it's really interesting. You had said earlier, as a college basketball athlete, and I was a college football athlete, and let's strip that all away and just say it this way: we're Americans. We are in a performance-driven country, right. And we are performance-based. And my dad could have played pro baseball or football. Your dad was an athlete. So we're not pushed on, but this is something that's a value in the household. And I had an experience a couple years ago. Well, it would have been 2000 and what is this year? Is this 18? 2017, the day before I shot the biggest bull of my life. This one right here, John Eldridge said, is just a baby bull. He teases me for who shot the baby bull, but I shot a giant bull. And the day before that hunt, I had an experience with God where I was really frustrated and knew that there was something going on in my life. And basically showed me was, I want to affirm you. I want to validate you so you no longer have to compete, compare, criticize, all of these things. And that moment, after that, I ended up shooting the biggest bull of my life after I missed the easiest shot of my life. And God just said, hey, look, this is what I can do. And then our ministry, since that elk hunt, has tripled, quadrupled.
Right.
I mean, our podcast went from 10,000 our first year to over 40,000 this second year. Things are blown up. And I think a large part of it is because I realized I personally, on a personal level, received the belovedness or the affirmation or the validation of the Father, which really led me to a new, now help me out, maybe I'm using your terms wrong, a new orientation about who I am in the kingdom. And you wrote this in your book, and I love this statement. You wrote, quote, "I resolutely hope for an uprising of men, oriented men who will make a kingdom difference in the world." So help me understand when you say, I've never heard the phrase before, and I really like it. I'll probably never forget this phrase. But when you talk to us about an oriented man, what are you talking about?
An oriented man is a man who knows who he is, where he is, and the good that God is up to in his life. And in the kingdom, knowing where you are is really important. That's the environment in which you live. Are you, you think of different characters who understand the environment that they're in. Like Jason Bourne is a great example. He knows that he lives in a hostile environment. There's things looking for him. Now, Jason's problem is he doesn't know yet who he is.
Yes.
In the story, but Jason Bourne is a dangerous dude. He's trained in an environment that is hostile. Bear Grylls is another one. That guy drops into different places oriented to the environment. He brings the proper equipment, and he knows what to eat and what not to eat, which droppings to eat and which droppings not to, so those are environmental. That's that question.
Well,
where I am. Do I know where I am?
You quote a lot from the movie Braveheart, and Mel Gibson's character, William Wallace, really had an understanding, in my opinion, of who he was. Yeah. In other words, he was a free man. That's who he was. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and his father told him that, in the vision earlier in the film as a boy. And then his uncle Argyle comes and reinforces all of that and helps him return home in a major, huge conflict, right? England and Scotland, but with a very settled heart. And he wanted to be a farmer, and he was really a peace. He wanted to live in peace. But when they threatened his family, when they threatened the woman that he loves, when they threatened his community, he rose up.
My next question was the one you're answering right now, because I think the oriented man is a man who knows who he is, where he is, and then I changed a little bit what you wrote on the third one just for my own understanding and simplicity, but let's talk about where he is. Now, to me, when I read that, I thought, okay, where am I in the context of my geography? I'm in McMinnville, Oregon. Where am I in the context of time? Where am I in the context of my relationships? Where am I in the context of just our economy? Where am I? I'm thinking of along these terms. Are there other things that are bigger than that we need to be thinking about in our contextual analysis of where we are?
Yeah, I think those are kind of the micro context. Those are very real and real time and relationships and all those things. And then I think you have to pan out to the macro. There's the microscope and the telescope. And the thing that I think, we know that a lot of men are suffering from, they don't understand the larger story that their story's in. And I love that you use the word, Jim, context. If I say there's a relationship between characters and the environment that they're in. So if I say Winnie the Pooh and Tigger, the environment is the 100-acre woods. If I say galaxies far, far away, we're talking about Jedis and the Force. So, but if we live without context and we don't understand the larger story, you were talking about some things that were in your immediate story. And what we mean is the larger story of the spiritual realm and how it works. If you don't, most men don't understand how the spiritual realm works, the economy, and I'll tell you a couple people who got it right. J.R.R. Tolkien in Middle Earth, that is a great analogy and illustration of how the kingdoms work. You've got two kingdoms at war. Good versus evil. That's why we tell so many stories with good versus evil. That's why, because we live in a story with good versus evil.
Yes.
And we live in a story that good wins. And we always tell that story that good wins. And it may take a trilogy to get there, but eventually, and so Lewis had it also with Narnia. I mean, these are
Screw tape letters.
Screw tape letters, the White Witch, the Pevensey Children. The Matrix is another. I mean, so these aren't just illustrations of fantasy. These are realities that the Christian kingdom man and woman need to understand how it works, and so we strive in our ministry to walk people into these orientation questions, and that's a huge one. Is, do you understand the story that your story is in? Because the context is the relationship is thick.
Yeah, we live in the midst of a grand kingdom drama that's unfolding before us, that's beyond. So our orientation is understand where we are in the middle of that which is seen with the eyes is temporal, but that which is unseen is eternal. I believe that's 2 Corinthians 4:18. And this is what you're talking about, right? The physical world, the tangible world versus the intangible. So understanding, well, this is I look at life pretty simple. I think for men, we need to really simplify things. And so for me, I've simplified it to this. We want men to be the best version of themselves, but how can a man be his best version unless he's radically sold out to Jesus Christ? This is very simple to me because we can't get oriented if we aren't radically sold out to the one who created us and put us in the midst of the story. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and just like we have to say we're talking about that and 10 other things.
Yeah.
I wish it was simpler. And really, when you're an oriented man, it gets simpler.
Yeah.
You put me in a cockpit, Dale and Jim. You don't want me to hit any buttons, and you don't want me to try to put that thing in the air. I'm not oriented to that space.
Yeah.
But you put one of my friends who is he's oriented there. He's been trained in what all those buttons do, how they work, and he's the one I want to be in front of me on the nose of that plane, getting me from here to wherever. So it becomes simple to him, because he's been trained that way, and I think that's part of what we do want to offer men is healing and training, and how the world works, who you are in it as a kingdom man, and the good that God's up to in your life, and the restorative good that God's up to in the whole story. So that context that we're talking about, that's what I mean. 10 other things. If you are naive, or you're ignorant, or you just want to kind of put your head in the sand, you really don't want to be in Narnia, you don't want to live in Middle Earth, you don't want to enter into the Matrix, it's going to hammer you. You're going to be a casualty and a victim over and over and over again, because we live in a war, we live in a battle, and that's what happens in war and battle to those who don't want to fight or wish they could be pacifists. And so what kind of armor, what kind of equipment has God given us in the kingdom, and how do we wield it as if we're going to need it? When Jesus gives his power and authority to his friends, it implies that we're going to need his power and authority.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get hammered because that's what life does to us. But if we're oriented, we reorient, we get back up. You wrote somewhere in your book, oh man, if I can find this quote. These days I get to hang out with oriented men who are not bulletproof, but who get hit far less than they used to, men who struggle, but who struggle well.
Thanks for listening to the first part of our interview with the Mancard podcast. Tune in next week for part 2 of the interview regarding the Heart of a Warrior book. Before you can become the warrior, you must become the beloved son. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.